Welcome back to Management Development Unlocked. I am super glad you're here. I'm Eric Girard, CEO of Girard Training Solutions, which is a management development firm that focuses on helping new managers transform from high-performing individual contributors to outstanding people managers. I also have an Amazon #1 best-selling book called Lead Like a Pro, The Essential Guide for New Managers. So check that out on Amazon. Today, I am delighted to have Kerri Burchill with me. Kerri, welcome to the show. Who are you and what do you do?
Hey, thanks so much, Eric. Actually, I just referred a colleague of mine to your delegation training session.
Yeah.
As a sidebar. So when you talk about like growing leaders, like I can tell everyone that's listening, this is really what Eric does.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I am also a leadership consultant, a little bit different than Eric's work in that I help leaders and teams in messy dynamic situations. So everything from like police departments to manufacturing firms to healthcare in corporate settings, just slowing down to figure out where they need to go. But that path of sort of figuring out how to help people slow down to go fast came from some of my own journey. So I was fast-tracked in my original career. I have an education background. And in my, mid-30s, second youngest assistant principal in the second largest board in Canada in middle schools, and was just on the fast track to be like principal, superintendent, what seemed to be a pretty linear path for me. And my partner too was really afforded some great opportunities in his career. And we knew by the time our late 30s, early 40s came in, we probably hit a pretty big ceiling. And not that the ceiling mattered as much as we didn't feel like we were positioned to really give back to the community in ways that we wanted to. And so we thought like, hey, let's just change it up. Let's put a couple of rods in the fire and see what happens. So I applied for a principalship on a NATO base in the Netherlands, and he applied for med school. He was a chiropractor at the time. So long story short, I say we did med school. And that really took me out of my very secure, like sort of union setting job into corporate entities. So I worked in New York City first of all, I was principal in the Caribbean, and then worked in New York City's. So they have 100,000 teachers, 1 million students in their Department of Education, just unbelievable. And because I needed a visa and sponsorship, they kind of put me in the jobs that, people like normal Americans are not going to take, right? Just kind of the really challenging schools. And actually the Department of Education called it persistently dangerous. That's how just out of control the kids were. I'm not exaggerating, Eric, when I say people called 911 during class change, like the teachers called 911. Anyway, so from the Caribbean to New York City, we moved to Detroit, where I started coaching teachers in similarly dysfunctional environments. And then we moved to Baltimore, ended up transitioning to healthcare when we moved to rural Illinois, and I'm now in San Antonio. So I kind of give that background of opportunities, not only because it's really positioned me to sort of give back, it also has shown me how messy things are, and looking at those environments and structures that help people sort of slow down, get strategic, get a handle on all the variables out of their control. And that has kind of led me to the coaching and consulting work that I do now.
Holy cow, what a background.
Yes.
You dropped some stats I just had no idea about, like 1 million students, 100,000 teachers in the New York public school system. I read a book by a woman who taught in the Bronx, and she had some pretty interesting stories as well. So holy cow. Well, glad you're here with us.
Me too.
And today we're going to talk about your book, which deals with something called an ASKhole. And I have to be very careful how I enunciate that. So our topic today is leading out of the ASKhole Trap. And I'm going to ask you, before we get into the question set, I'd like you to please define what is an ASKhole.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've been doing some keynote speaking around this, and there's that kind of existing floating urban dictionary definition of an ASKhole as someone who asks for your advice and then ignores it. And I've kind of plunged deeper into that definition in a leadership context of those people around you, could be above you at your level of leadership, could be direct reports, people that ask you to do their work for them, or they ask you questions they know the answer to. And so as leaders, because we care, and there's this sort of draw to be a servant leadership. And so, we often think of servant leadership as someone who goes the extra mile. I'm serving my staff. I'm there for them. I want to support them. And so when they come and ask us to do stuff that they could do, or they ask us questions they know the answer to, we're these caring, committed leaders. And so we go right ahead and go the extra mile and either do what they're asking or answer them again, just in case they didn't understand, which they totally did. And then as a leader, you're falling into the ASKhole trap, because then what happens is the employee or colleague is not happy with how you did it, or they're angry at your answer that they already knew the answer to, but now they get to blame you and you're in the trap. So that's kind of how the cycle of the ASKhole trap works.
All right. So that is an ASKhole, and that is the trap. And the Urban Dictionary definition sounds like something my friends would point at me and say, yeah, he's one of those. Because my wife especially, I ask for advice and then I go do the opposite thing. So I'm getting better at listening to people.
Yeah. Well, and it's not, like I say this in my book, right? Grace and generosity, people that have ASKhole behaviors are not jerks. Like, they're not what ASKhole sounds like. It's really, they're trying to get stuff done. They're driven. They're frustrated with the environment that's messy and dynamic and changing all the time. And everyone's just, trying to do their best. It comes across like you're being positioned to do their work or answer questions that you're going to get blamed for with the answer, right? So it's the result of the spin and that day-to-day pressure to get more done faster, but it doesn't really come because they're jerks. It comes because these people are committed to doing the work. That's the irony.
Yeah, and that is ironic. Well, that is very helpful. So thank you for setting the frame with that.
Yeah.
What is your advice for managers, experienced managers, senior leaders? What's your advice for these folks?
Yeah. So it would be interesting to ask you that same question here when I'm done also, like in our expertise, right? If we had a wish for people. So if you're new in the role, what's going to be super powerful for you is that ability to actively listen. And I actually spend quite a bit of time in my book on this. I say active listening is the hardest leadership skill out there. So one, imagine that your boss comes to you and rattles off some things that you need to do, and you think you understand. And so you're, okay, good. And then off you go when you haven't done the active listening part. And so you might go ahead and work on a big project and then put it on a silver platter for your boss and say, so happy to have done exactly what you asked me to do. And then your boss is like, well, no, I needed this and this and this done differently. And then you've just created some rework for yourself because you didn't slow your boss down, who's coming in from whatever spin and pressure they're facing, without that active listening back and forth to slow your boss down and get granular on what they want. You're never really going to have this tight connection. You're going to hear one thing, springboard from it, and off you go, and inadvertently kind of create a spin for yourself, or worse, an ASKhole trap. And if they're your team or your direct reports, you might be asking people to do some things. So I talked about the delegation that you offer and support people with as just one of the many things that Eric does. And so in that delegation, I can rattle off, can you please this, expectations, that sort of thing. If I don't make the other person actively listen back, if we don't have an exchange, and I just let the recipient of my instructions be passive listeners, guaranteed they're not going to hit the mark. And that's just because we haven't slowed down for this connection. So active listening, short answer, long answer, short answer.
And I would plus one to that because in my book, the first and longest chapter is all about empathy, and a big part of empathy is active listening. So I think you're preaching to the choir with me, and I hope that my listeners are taking notes for sure.
Yeah, it's so hard to do, but it's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what causes people to spin, to get stuck? Let's talk about that a little bit when we're talking about ASKholes.
Yeah.
I just like saying that. Let's say it together. ASKhole.
When I wrote the book, my mom's like, Kerri, can you not come up with a better word? I'm like, my grandma turns 105 in August, and I said to Mom, don't tell grandma what that word, So I think it's really fun. But yeah, it definitely has a connotation, and I have to remind people what the true definition is so they don't assume the worst behind it.
Yeah.
So the spin, I sort of think of the spin as that firefighting that we do every day, right? The constant pressure. You fix something, an issue comes up again. You fix it, an issue comes up, and just that constant spin, and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. And so the active listening piece that we've just talked about is the gateway to slowing down that spin. So my boss might come in and ask me to do some stuff. I might, as a leader, ask someone else to do things. But if we don't slow down, all we're sort of doing is transferring our spin onto the other person, and they're going to get a hold of whatever the instructions are, boof, run with it, and spinning so hard that we haven't really slowed down to think about, what are the priorities? How does this align with the big vision? What are the timelines? What questions do I have? What resources do I not have that I need? Who else needs to be involved? What could collaboration look like out of this? And so that's the risk of not active listening, as you get pulled in the spin, and the spin just creates burnout. It really creates ineffective leadership and more issues that you have to fix, issue fix.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, my final question for you in this section of the show is you obviously have a lot of experience in being a leadership consultant. I think we could probably talk for another couple hours just about what it's like to do this work. So what's your favorite part of being a leadership consultant?
Yeah, it's funny, just for your listeners, when Eric and I hopped on, just kind of level setting what we were doing today, and he was, of course, being gracious and thanking me for coming on the show. I love talking with other leaders. So this is just fun to be able to chat with you about this. It's not a lot different than when I was a middle school teacher. I love seeing people make progress. Like, I'm not someone that's striving for perfection. To me, it's about slowing down to go fast to make the progress. And so in the middle school classroom, right, you have all those hormonal teenagers, things are rough. And to see these light bulbs or these sort of epiphanies that would drive the kids forward was really satisfying for me as a teacher. And that's exactly what it is in leadership too, to see these leaders that are bogged down with just the chaos of the environment, and then figuring out a structure that can kind of take some of that chaos and take the energy to move it forward. I mean, that is just so exciting to journey with people and help them slow down. I'm not an expert in police for sure, or manufacturing or healthcare, but I am an expert in helping people slow down to think about what is causing their spin. What structures do they need to sort of make sure that they don't fall in the ASKhole trap all the time? And that stuff is so satisfying because it saves the leader from the spin, right? They're going to get time back with their families. They're going to get time to do more of the leadership work they love. They're going to build problem solvers. And the neat part is when leaders grow and make progress and they have those epiphanies, it then translates to their team, because the teams are then set up for more success. They feel more empowered. They feel like, I can do this. My leader trusts me to do this, all because we just sort of slowed down the spin and figured out what each party needs to move forward. So when those things click, it's so satisfying.
Excellent. Right on. Well, I love it. I love how you talked about things clicking, and there's a special feeling you get when things are just clicking along and you see the light bulbs pop and you see different, better behaviors on the job. To me, that's the big reward is folks report, hey, I'm doing things differently at work and I'm getting better results. And that is huge. Yeah.
And they're happier, right? Like those leaders are feeling, I'm sure you see this in your work, Eric, right? Like they're taking the concepts you're teaching them and they feel empowered, and that drives success. Like everybody that I work with, whether it's direct clients or sort of the team that they're serving, they want to be successful. And so, to sort of see them feeling successful when they've maybe hit a wall for whatever reason before, that's just so exciting to be a part of that success.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, let's change tack a little bit and talk about your book. So your book is called Leading Out of the ASKhole Trap. So tell us about it.
Really just a compilation of some of these things that I've learned in my life journeys on what pulls people into the spin. What is the spin? And then thinking of like, if I were to just keep that spin at bay so that as a leader, I can get the work done. That's not saying that I'm going to create an oasis as a leader, because new environments, things are always changing. Leadership is tough. Things are messy. But what are the strategies to at least move forward despite the chaos in ways that I can mitigate my burnout or my leaders' burnout, or feeling more successful, just at the end of the day, feeling more successful. So I have time back to do more of the work I love. So it gets at some case studies. I've mentioned doing just a bunch of keynote speaking. So really pulling from the audience. I've done some research with a number of leaders that I did some really intense work over a period of years. So it's a blend of like lived experience, academic researchy stuff, as well as what people are saying that helps them just in the trenches. So yeah, a go-to read, hopefully.
Awesome. And where can people find it?
On Amazon.
All right.
Yep. Leading out of the ASKhole Trap, Kerri Burchill.
Okay, cool. Now, I invited you to ask a question of me. So this is completely turning the tables, and this is something I want to try and see how it works. So do you have a question you want to ask me?
Yeah, gosh. Because we're just a similar spirit supporting leaders, I'm just curious if you like had a magic wand and could make the world better, king for a day sort of stuff. What is one leadership skill that you would just love everyone to have because you know it would make their life so much easier?
It has to be just one?
Yes.
Well, that's cruel. That's not nice. Okay, if it's just one, and I'm thinking about the chapters in my book and all the things that I teach, and I'm torn between empathy and delegation, because I think that leaders today in 2024 need to be empathetic human beings to help people cope with just the massive amount of stuff that's going on outside of work, as well as the change that's going on inside of work. So empathy is one, and then delegation is another, because I think a lot of new managers especially have kind of a hero complex, and they said, you know what, I can do these things better and faster and cheaper myself, so I'll just do it. And they don't delegate, and then they become the bottleneck. Yeah. So I have to choose.
And they jump in the ASKhole trap when they don't delegate. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the hero. Yeah. I hear you. I see it.
Yeah. So since we've already talked about that, I'm going to go with empathy. I'm going to say that leaders really need to be empathetic human beings. And if you're not a naturally empathetic human, that's okay. You can learn. You can do small things. So for example, you can read Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, and learn a little bit about emotional intelligence. And there are lots of other books out there on the market now that kind of follow that book. You can start taking little steps, putting yourself into progressively more uncomfortable situations so that you are better able to take on other people's points of view. So an example I use is I'm in the Seattle area, and we have a pretty significant homeless population here. So currently what I'm doing is, as I drive around, if I see somebody who's asking for help, I'll hand them a Cliff Bar. Sometimes my kids and my family and I will make up packages of stuff, supplies that can be useful to somebody who's living on the street. I'll pass along a phone number to a shelter or something. So I will give stuff to people, but that's really easy because all I have to do is pull over, roll down the passenger window, and hand it out the window. That's very simple and very easy. And so the next step for me will be to serve the homeless food, to actually go to a situation where I'm sitting down with somebody and talking with them and getting to know them.
Interacting.
Yeah, and interacting. So that would be, the next step for me in that arena. And so, you don't have to take gargantuan steps to suddenly become a transformed human being. Just think about, well, wait a minute, how can I not just understand how somebody feels, but really feel what they feel? How can I ask questions and ask open-ended questions and listen deeply so that I understand what it's like to be Kerri in this situation? And that just it's small steps over time. So that's probably the thing I would say to a new leader today.
Powerful stuff. I mean, we're so busy doing. I think my LinkedIn newsletter this last week was, are you a human being or a human doing? And we're just in this rush to do more that we don't slow down for the empathy, right? We don't sort of just even have that reflecting moment. What's it like to be Eric? Like what's it like to be that homeless person, right? Just slowing down. I reached behind me. Do you know this book?
I love that book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I've read it. I love it.
Yeah, I thought it would be on your list too. Yeah, you mentioned the Goldstein one. That's it's like a $15 book, and there's a code in the back that you can scratch out with a penny, and find out, you can take the survey and it just gives you some real high level feedback, but around the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. But I point to it as you talk about empathy, Eric, because sometimes, like you say, you can learn how to be more empathetic. And that book just has some nice strategy on social awareness. Like, how do I even read the room to then position me to be a little more empathetic, or relationship management? How am I gauging whether or not I'm actually being an effective, empathetic partner with this person or whatever? Self-management and then self-awareness. So as another bonus for your audience, maybe that's a good read for them too.
Yeah, that's a great book. Thank you. Right on. Well, Kerri, that brings us to the end of our talk. Thank you so much. That was a splendid conversation. How can people find you if they want to talk to you more?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Kerri Burchill, or you can find me at kerriburchill.com. Right. There's a link on my website if people want to just have a chat about their spin or what they're. It is just a joy to talk with other leaders, so I'm always happy to connect. Just because it's the right thing to do, not a consulting paid thing. It's just good to connect and know we're not alone in this crazy leadership world. So you can make an appointment with me through my website if you want to.
Okay, well, that is awesome. That's how you find Kerri Burchill. So with that, folks, thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the show and connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Pick up my book, Lead Like a Pro, The Essential Guide for New Managers, available on Amazon. So maybe while you're shopping for Kerri's book, you pick mine up too. And also, you can get the first 2 chapters free on my website, GerardTrainingsolutions.com. And if you'd like to chat about how I can help you or your new managers, please drop me a line via my website, GerardTrainingsolutions.com. We will catch you on the next one. Thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.